Forget royal feasts and shining armor. Medieval life had a smell. Before toilets, before plumbing, even before privacy, people had to answer nature's call in the most bizarre ways imaginable. This is how people really went to the bathroom in the medieval world. They crouched behind hedges, balanced over buckets, sat shoulder to shoulder on long benches with no dividers, and sometimes they even fell in and drowned. In the Middle Ages, going to the bathroom wasn't just unpleasant. It was public, dangerous, and deeply humiliating. No sewers, no plumbing, no privacy. So how did people handle their most basic needs? And what does that reveal about the filth, the dignity, and the decay of medieval life before pipes, porcelain, and plumbing? Nature itself was the only restroom. In the countryside, things were simple. A hedgerow, a hollow in a field, or the far edge of a pasture would do. But in the crowded medieval towns, surrounded by high walls and countless neighbors, that simplicity turned into shame. Human needs hadn't changed, but social expectations had. Public defecation became a punishable offense, with fines awaiting those who dared. Yet most people still had no private latrine. They relieved themselves in buckets, clay bowls, or anything that could hold what the body expelled. Some had easement chairs, wooden seats with a hole set over a pot, while others wandered narrow alleys in search of a dark corner, hoping not to be seen. In London, a record from 139 tells of a beggar boy who squatted in the street to relieve himself, only to be crushed by a passing cart. The records called him a savage. The true tragedy wasn't just the accident, but the cruelty of the judgment that followed. To be caught relieving yourself in public wasn't just embarrassing. It branded you as filthy, poor, and unworthy. Thus, one of life's most natural acts became a mark of social status, where you once said everything about who you were. Inside the medieval home, the chamber pot waited, quiet, necessary, and shameful. It might be made of clay, pewter, or even silver. Wealthier households hid them behind tapestries or tucked them inside wooden cabinets, while poorer families kept them beside the hearth or beneath the bed. Everyone used them. No one spoke of them. In theory, these pots offered privacy. In practice, their contents had to go somewhere, emptied into cesspits, dung heaps, or all too often, straight into the street. Despite countless laws, many people simply hurled the waste from their windows with a quick shout, or sometimes with no warning at all. Medieval streets stank of decay, not just from animals and garbage, but from humanity itself. In a world without sewers, every full pot became a moral problem, and every emptied one, a reminder that cleanliness had no simple solution. Still, every pot had to be carried, by hand, down staircases through courtyards, and into the open. In the end, even nobles faced what the poor did daily. What leaves the body never truly leaves the world. In cramped tenements, where walls were thin and smells traveled like gossip, waste caused constant conflict. It seeped into foundations, warped wooden beams, and poisoned relationships. The commode chair promised privacy, but in crowded towns built close and tight, privacy was a fragile illusion. Behind every stone wall and iron latch lay the same secret: people pretending to be cleaner than they really were. The built-in latrine seemed like progress, a permanent and civilized solution to a filthy problem. But beneath its stone seats and wooden planks lurked a darker danger: the cesspit. It held what no one wished to see, and, at times, it took lives. In 1326, a man named Richard Lariquier climbed atop his household privy. The wood beneath him gave way. He fell in and drowned his own waste. This wasn't rumor or legend. It was documented truth. Across medieval cities, London, Paris, York, Bruges, cesspits were hidden hazards. They leaked through shared walls, seeped into wells, and sometimes collapsed under years of neglect. City councils passed ordinances, desperate to control the growing tide of filth, but the stench of civilization refused to stay buried. Pits were required to be lined with stone and placed at least 2.5 feet from the property line. More if the pit was unlined. But rules couldn't fill holes, and they couldn't stop the rot. When a pit overflowed, lawsuits followed. So did feuds, and at times, diseases too quiet to be named. Privies were progress, yes, but they were also death traps. And the closer people lived to one another, the clearer it became. The line between relief and ruin was frighteningly thin. In many medieval homes, especially those packed into dense urban blocks, the toilet wasn't below the floor, but instead hung from the wall. These were called garderobes. They jutted out from the second or third story, often over a back alley or courtyard. A small wooden seat, a hole, a vertical shaft, and, at the bottom, nothing but open air and whatever lay below. In theory, waste fell into a pit or drainage trench. In practice, it landed wherever gravity chose. The medieval alley was more than loud and crowded. It was haunted by what dropped from above. Even the sky, it seemed, wasn't clean. Eventually, city leaders realized waste needed more than walls and warnings. It needed a system, so they began to build one. By the 13th century, towns like York issued decrees, one public latrine per ward. They called them sedge houses, long rows of wooden seats, each with a hole, aligned side by side without partitions. These stood on bridges, in market squares, or along riversides. People sat shoulder to shoulder, flesh against wood, with the sound of running water below. A 3-seated oak latrine discovered in London still bears the marks of use, proof of a time when privacy meant nothing and necessity ruled. In Shrewsbury, a 15th-century longhouse straddled the river with 128 seats, men and women separated. It wasn't luxury. It was survival. These latrines emptied straight into the river. No cesspit, no shoveling, just gravity and flow. To some, it was ingenious engineering. To others, it was civilization built on waste. To others, it was filth disguised as progress. Yet for the poor, those without chamber pots, garderobes, or any semblance of privacy, a public latrine was more than wood and water. It was a small mercy, a place where shame dissolved into the collective, where no one judged you for what every body must do. For a few moments, necessity was equality. Some cities turned to rivers for salvation. Why dig cesspits when gravity and current could wash everything away? So they built their toilets directly over the water, the Thames, the Fleet, the Ouse, the Yexi. Public latrines stood like wooden docks, benches suspended above slow-moving filth. When one relieved themselves, the river did the rest. In Shrewsbury, a longhouse offered 28 seats divided by gender, perched over the water's edge. In York and Exeter, bridges had pissing holes hidden beneath their stone arches. London followed suit. To the medieval mind, flowing water was nature's own cleanser. If the eye couldn't see the waste, perhaps the conscience could forget it. But the truth was uglier. Waste clung to riverbanks, blackened fish, poisoned wells, and turned clean water into a silent killer. Yet for centuries, rivers remained the easiest solution to an impossible problem. They swallowed what people couldn't bear to bury, and in return, they demanded only health and sometimes human lives. And then there were those who faced what everyone else flushed away, the gong farmers or fowler latrinarum. They worked in darkness, beneath the floors, deep inside cesspits. They descended into rot armed with nothing but buckets, ropes, and rags. The job paid well, but the cost was steep. They wrapped themselves in old layers of cloth to muffle the fumes and carried flickering torches dangerously close to the gases that could ignite at any moment. In 1339, one such worker drowned in the Thames while trying to wash the filth from his skin after a shift. Many died young. Others lived long enough only to be shunned. Too filthy to marry, too necessary to ignore. Cities depended on them, yet offered no respect, no safety, no honor. They were ghosts in the machinery of civilization, shoveling away the stench so others could breathe easy. They weren't merely laborers. They were the unseen priests of filth, absolving the city of its sins one bucket at a time. And when they vanished into the dark, few remembered their names. Even filth, it seemed, could be turned into profit. As public latrines multiplied, cities began leasing them to private individuals. In 15th century Coventry, a man named William Pier rented the public privies of West Orchard for 9 years. He paid an annual fee. In return, he was responsible for keeping the latrines clean, maintaining the nearby bridge, and collecting whatever coins the desperate could spare. Toilets became trade. A few pence for the right to sit, a single coin for the privilege of relief. Yet not everyone turned away. Some saw in the stench of waste a reflection of human suffering, and chose compassion instead. In 1309, John of Walton built a public privy near St. Margaret's Church. In the 1420s, Richard Whittington, the famed mayor of London, left funds in his will to construct a 128-seat latrine for the poor, hidden beneath an almshouse. A widow later donated coins for its roof repairs. Another former mayor left a yearly sum to keep it standing. These weren't cathedrals or monuments of grandeur. They were holes in benches, buckets in the dark, but they were also acts of mercy in a world where filth clung to skin, smell, and soul. To give someone the chance to relieve themselves with dignity was an offering as sacred as bread or shelter. Sometimes, salvation didn't come from a sermon. It came from a seat. Medieval toilets were more than dirty corners or crumbling pits. They exposed what society tried hardest to hide: its shame, its hierarchy, its quiet cruelties. In every emptied bucket, every garderobe built too close, every child punished for a natural act, we see a world struggling to civilize the uncivilizable and failing. And yet, even amid the waste, there were gestures of grace. That, too, is history, not just what people built, but what they try to bury. The Middle Ages were filled with secrets, some filthy, some fascinating. If this glimpse into medieval life intrigued you, there's more history waiting just beyond the curtain. Don't forget to subscribe to Banner and Battlement for more untold stories of the medieval world.